Great to be here with you, 3 and Out. So much to get to today on the show. We'll hear from Jared Benko, Georgia Southern Athletic Director. Obviously, some change this week, needless to say, with Chad Lunsford out as head coach, Kevin Whitley taking over as the interim head football coach. What's the latest with Gavin Adcock, who is suspended indefinitely? And what are the Eagles looking forward to in their coaching search and as the direction of the program? Jared Benko will join us coming up in hour number 2. We'll talk to him about all of that. Also talk SEC with Matt Smith, southernpigskin.com. He will join us coming up in about 20 minutes. And Derek Abney, former Kentucky All-American, wide receiver, DJ Shockley, former Georgia quarterback, both going to join us here on 3 and Out this afternoon. We'll hear from Derek Abney, hour 2. DJ Shockley will join us in the final hour. So much to get to here on 3 and Out. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Hear us on the radio, obviously on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We are streaming live there as well. But so much football to get to, BJ. We start off with something fun today with what offense is off to a tougher start here in 2021. Clemson without Trevor Lawrence or the Jacksonville Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence?
That's a good question from Christian there. Both are obviously struggling. I think for me, I would say Clemson, because Clemson right now, as we've talked about a couple of times this week, they are 123rd in the nation in offense. I mean, that is crazy to think about, and they're 2 spots away from being Vanderbilt. So they're 2 spots in the rankings statistically from being Vanderbilt. And I think, Jacksonville, some of this production has been when you're losing by multiple scores. I understand that contextually, but they're 23rd in the NFL in total offense, which isn't totally embarrassing. They're 4 spots ahead of Atlanta. Atlanta actually is 27th in the pros in total offense. So I think it's Clemson. What we've seen out of Clemson, really surprising. But it's not just Trevor. I think you could also say which offense is off to a tougher start without Travis Etienne. I think you could probably ask that as well.
Yeah, the easy answer is Clemson. I mean, when you think about the fact that they just completely fell off a cliff, and I know it all started in week 1 with a Georgia defense that hasn't really given up anything since week 1. But you look at how much this Clemson offense has struggled, every game of the season. Can't find anything to really go off of. The running game is non-existent. The passing game, it seems they forcing it. DJU is all in the news saying he's 100% confident in himself. I'm like, DJ, you supposed to say that in front of your family, not in front of the media, because if this is what 100% confidence look like, I don't even want to know what you start having doubts going to look like. But yeah, BJ, I give that Jacksonville offense a lot of credit. James Robinson is a guy that obviously you were going to be leaning on, even if Travis Etienne was there. And while I like, DJ Chark, while I like Laviska Shenault and Marvin Jones and those guys, you got a guy in Trevor Lawrence who's trying to run for his life and try to do all he can with an offensive line that has offensive linemen doing pirouettes during freaking plays. Like, hey, Norvell, I want you to turn around. So yeah, it is Clemson, and it's Clemson in a big way. And dare I say, BJ, being 23rd in the NFL means, okay, man, most teams are gonna be middle of the road. Clemson is almost in the bottom of 130 Division I schools. So yeah, it's Clemson, and it ain't even close.
Yeah, and again, it shows you where they're at here, because this was a team that was dynamic offensively for so many years, and now, as you said, 123rd in total offense. And you can't just say, oh, well, they've played a tough schedule. I mean, yeah, Georgia shut them down, but Georgia Tech, not necessarily thought of to be one of the best defenses in college football, locked them up for the most part. NC State held them down for the most part. They haven't had that offensive game that makes you go, wow, this is 4 and 5 stars all over the field. They are almost the worst. There's only 7 teams through the first month, BJ, that are worse on offense than Clemson, and it's not because of who Clemson has played. That's for sure.
Well, and I thought we were going to see the breakout on Saturday against NC State, and we certainly did not. It was a very poor offensive effort, and even with overtime, you barely made it over 200 total yards. So it is kind of, just baffling in some respects to look at Clemson, look at the talent, look at the recruiting rankings. I know they've had some injuries, but to see the lack of production week after week consistently is hard to explain. I think losing for Clemson, Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne at once, combined with, Amari Rogers, Jackson Carman, a couple of offensive linemen, they're just not the same right now. And I think they're lacking confidence as well.
everybody that thought that they had a factory, going on in Clemson needs to pump the brakes a little bit. I think that, it all starts and ends at the quarterback position when you talk about a guy like DJU, BJ. I know they've had some transfer guys that's moved on away from the program, but it ain't just a play and plug place as much as we thought it was, right? Like you see certain schools be able to say, listen, no Trevor Lawrence, no problem. No, Trevor Lawrence, BJ, I know what you say about Travis Etienne, but Travis Etienne, as great as he was, still did it with very, very few carries. They didn't even feature him, and he was still able to be as great as he is. But Trevor Lawrence kept you balanced. He kept you ahead of the chains. No situation was too big for him. And if you gave him time, he was going to pick you apart. So, yeah, I mean, Clemson is struggling right now. I do think, something we may get to. I mean, maybe the rest of the ACC just have caught up to this Clemson team who you get so used to being up there by yourself.
I don't know about that, man.
At least, BJ, at least for right now, I'm not saying the next 10 years. I'm just saying for right now, what do we usually say? There is nobody but Clemson. Now, it's a bunch of somebodies. It just wasn't the somebodies we thought it would be. It ain't Miami. It ain't North Carolina. It's more NC State, Virginia Tech, Duke, Wake. So give credit where credit is due. If you are Clemson, you're going to have to find a way to get it going because Kevin and BJ, nobody, and I do mean nobody, is going to feel sorry for a team that has beat the hell out of everybody in the ACC the last 6 years.
No, nobody's going to feel bad for him at all. And I think that's something that's interesting to watch as this Clemson team unfolds. Preseason number 1 or 2 team in the country, and now they are very close to falling out of the top 25 altogether here in just a span of a month. So something very interesting to watch there with Clemson. Obviously, Jacksonville going through their struggles. You mentioned the Falcons there, BJ, as well, offensively. Do we know what they want to do? I mean, we saw Arthur Smith in Tennessee. Hey, I got the big running back. I can pound the rock, and my quarterback just needs to make a few plays. And really doesn't even need to make a few plays. Just don't turn the ball over. Well, now you don't have that, but you have Matt Ryan. What does this team want to be offensively? And through a couple 3 games, do we even know what they want to be at this point?
I think that's fair to ask. It does not look like it. And of course, Arthur Smith was going to have different offensive goals in Atlanta compared to Tennessee. The rosters are different offensively, but I think the separation between the play at the line of scrimmage that Arthur Smith had in Tennessee and what you have right now in Atlanta is pretty significant. And of course, you don't have Derrick Henry. We know that. But more so than that, the offensive line is still a work in progress for the Falcons. And we get so focused on quarterback play and running back play and receivers that you sometimes forget that it all starts at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's where Atlanta's struggling. If you can't set the table, so to speak, you're not going to have a good meal. And I think Atlanta's got to find a way to be a little more productive at the point of attack. Some of these young guys have got to, start to play up to where they were drafted to a certain extent. And it's not been totally terrible. I think there have been signs of progress, but it's like we've talked about with Georgia's offensive line. You don't need guys to excel individually. You need guys to excel collectively. And I think right now there doesn't seem to be that cohesion up front for Atlanta. And to me, that's the biggest difference. I think Arthur Smith knows what he wants to do. Matt Ryan knows what he wants to do. But if your offensive line play is struggling, look at Jacksonville. It's hard to overcome that with your skill.
I just think it comes down to a lack of creativity. When you think about certain teams, they give you some type of offensive identity. And when you think about this Falcons team, BJ, I do agree with something you said. Guys got to start living up to their draft position. But if their draft position is a first-round pick, that just means that you can't be terrible. And I'm not talking about Kyle Pitts. I'm talking about the 2 first-round picks you got in 2019, because I was at the draft. You had 2 opportunities, and you picked two offensive linemen in the first round. Matty Ice, as good as he is older. Matty Ice's best years are behind him. Matty Ice understands how to play the quarterback position. Matty Ice is the greatest quarterback in Falcons history. And what does that mean? Your second leading receiver is a receiver. Your leading running back is not. Your leading running back is a receiver. I have a problem with that. I understand having a guy that can play multiple positions, but he can't be your feature back. Mike Davis, I don't know what the problem is, but the thing about Arthur Smith is Arthur Smith had an anomaly at running back when he was at Tennessee. You had a goon, a goblin, whatever you want to call him. You ain't never seen nothing like Derrick Henry. And there's nothing you can compare him to. Derrick Henry walks in the room and you be like, oh, man, I thought I was in here to see the offense. That's a linebacker. No, that's a starting running back. You had to go from that to a regular running back. And the running game has to open up for the passing game. You got an offensive line that's still trying to find its way with guys playing out of position. But I will say, until they find a level of offensive identity, they got to let Matty Ice go from a quick passing game, screen passing game, intermediate passing game to a down-the-field passing game. Calvin really is still a number one receiver. I really, really like what he's doing right now. But when you watch Atlanta play, you can't just hope a play works. What are we executing? What are we trying to do? Because right now, I mean, let's throwing whatever at the wall and let's hope something sticks. That's not going to work with a defense that plays better but needs an offense to be more stable, until they find their footing as well.
Yeah, do you want to run Mike Davis, your big power back, or do you want to put a converted wide receiver in Cordarrelle Patterson back there? I mean, right? I mean, you haven't really had a lot of consistent identity in the first couple of weeks, and you very well could be looking at 0-3, if not for a Younghoe Koo field goal there up in New York. But again, where does this thing develop? I think is a big question with the Falcons. And you have a guy who can make plays for you at the quarterback spot. Why not tailor something around his ability to do that? Maybe guys can't get open. I don't know what we're seeing the first couple of weeks, but it seems like, much like in Tampa, when Tom Brady shows up, the new guy in kind of went to Tom Brady and said, what can you do? What can you do that works? And Tom Brady said, here's what I can do, and this is what I know works, and I can make it happen. And they did. And I kind of am thinking, again, does Matt Ryan have the same street cred as Tom Brady? No, but he's very good, very smart quarterback. Why not get more with Matt Ryan and say, look, you see the personnel, you know the guys that are blocking or in a lot of cases not blocking for you. What can we run that will make us be successful and kind of develop an identity off of that?
No, and I mean, I agree with that, Kevin. And Ben, I'm just asking, are you limited with kind of the creativity you can implement when your offensive line is struggling? And I do think these guys will get better. Ben, you referenced the 2 first-round draft picks, Caleb McGarry, Lindstrom out of Boston College. You think about what Matt Hennessy was drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds. You think about what you've been able to do, Jalen Mayfield. You've been able to bring in guys who maybe have some positional versatility, but you haven't seen that cohesion. And I do think it's easy to look at Matt Ryan and go, well, why isn't Matt Ryan completing downfield passes? Well, it takes time for downfield routes to develop. And look, I'm not blaming all of this on the offensive line. There's going to be no, I'm not. Christian's in here nodding his head. But look, there's going to be a learning curve when you have a new scheme, a new coach. But when you're replacing Julio Jones, when you're bringing in a new coach, and when you have a young offensive line, you mix all that together, and you're gonna have some inconsistencies. So I expect this group to get better. But you asked a second ago, Kevin, where does the growth come from? I think it comes from guys up front getting experience, not only experience in the league, but experience playing alongside one another. I think that's the key.
What's going to be the key to Atlanta is something that a lot of people can't stand, and that's being plain. That's being boring. That's just being very vanilla. Because the thing is, you can't get to the complex until you can do the just most mundane things. And I know you got the horses, right? I know you got the horses. I get it. But if the lead dog can't even, I mean, look at freaking Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is diving for first downs, diving, not sliding. Because you give yourself up when you slide, not when you dive. That's how hard it is. They got to stay on the field long enough. And I like what I see from Kyle Pitts. And this is what Kyle Pitts was there for. It is not to catch a bunch of passes. It's to catch touchdowns. Because what was it not? We can't get in the end zone. Atlanta, from the 20-yard end, is the worst offense in the NFL. The worst. The first game of the year, they probably had 6 possessions in the red zone. 6. Didn't get in the end zone. You get creative the closer you get to from the 20-yard end. Be vanilla, in between those 20s, because I think what I had to learn as a football player is you got to learn what you have to do normal before you can do the complex. We're not gonna add on until you can do this. And that's kind of what going to Atlanta. Hey man, let's do a down the field passing game. What the hell? You can't even do a 3-step drop. How you gonna do a 5-step? No, let's be boring until we can get to the complex. And when they do that, then you'll see the offense kind of open up more. But what bothers me the most is the box score. Not this and not the actual production. Cordarrelle Patterson gets more rushing attempts than Mike Davis. What is going on with that? I'll never understand that, but that's why I'm not in the NFL now, because a receiver getting more touches than the running back. And I'm talking about rushing the football. That's not offensive creativity. That begins with an S, ends with a Y, and I'm not going to fill in the blanket between as far as like what they're doing with that.
We'll leave it at that. We'll come back. Matt Smith will join us Smelly? Is that what you were going for? Matt Smith will join us when we come back. SouthernPigskin.com. We'll talk SEC football with him coming up next. Good to have you here, 3 and Out. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Big weekend of SEC football upcoming, and nobody better to talk about that with than our next guest, Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com. Matt, welcome. How are you?
Hey guys, doing well. Got my notes here on UConn and Vanderbilt, so pretty fired up.
Absolutely. I know those are a hot ticket there in Nashville, maybe because people are torching them, but that's we'll get to that. We'll save the best game for last, Matt. But Georgia Arkansas this weekend, 5 weeks ago, nobody would have thought this game would have been College Game Day worthy. Certainly not a top 10 matchup, yet here we are.
Yeah, I mean, you can say it's a big step up for Arkansas on Saturday, but I think it's also true for Georgia, given what we've seen on their schedule the past month in September. So I think we knew the offenses were going to be pretty limited after Clemson, but I think we can say now that includes Clemson after what they've put out there against Georgia Tech and NC State. That 3 points doesn't look quite as good. Now, does that make me doubt this Georgia defense? Not really. But I do think this is definitely a big step up on the offensive side of the ball, going against a guy like Barry Odom. I should just record every time I come on here what I say about Barry Odom. Same thing every week, just all the praise I keep bestowing on him, and rightly so. Another gem last week against Texas A&M. So can this Georgia offense find some balance? Odom's so good at taking away a team's strengths, and I think we're going to need that. Offense still not quite back there. JT Daniels banged up a little bit, so I think that's the big test for me. I do think Georgia will do enough defensively to shut down the run and force KJ Jefferson to have to throw a lot to beat them. And I don't think he's that type of quarterback. He's going to hit you one or twice deep with Burks in the big plays, but I don't think he can throw it 30, 35, 40 times and have Arkansas have any type of sustained success. So I think Georgia wins. I'd probably take the points just because I think Arkansas could hold Georgia maybe into the upper 20s, but I'm thinking 28 to 13-ish or so, kind of a game where Georgia holds it, but they never can quite do enough to pull away. I don't think we'll ever see any real moments past the first quarter where you think, I think Arkansas might steal this game, actually. I think Georgia controls it, but a really good test for Georgia's offense. I'm interested to see where that stands as they roll into the meat of their schedule here in October.
And Matt, we'll learn more about the Razorbacks on Saturday, but two wins over ranked teams, doubled up Texas A&M, a top 10 team. Is this a team that could be viewed as one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the SEC, or in your mind, are they still kind of tier 2? And do they have to prove it more week to week to be considered? I'm not saying Alabama or Georgia, but to be considered maybe in that group right after them.
Yeah, I think they're the way they coach. I think you could put them in that group with Florida and Ole Miss. I mean, they're clearly better than A&M. That was no fluke. They dominated that game. Texas A&M got one big play on offense from Spiller, and that was it. They did nothing else. So, yeah, I think we're going to have a lot more next week. Again, I think this is a monumental task this week, and I don't think it'll go particularly well for Arkansas. Got to turn around and play Ole Miss. Both teams coming off emotional, physical games this week. I think that's a great test. Obviously, a game Arkansas won last year. Barry Odom outcoached Lane Kiffin and Jeff Lebby and had Matt Corral completely lost in that game. So I think that'll be the true statement game for Arkansas about where they fit in that kind of 3 to 6 range there with teams like Ole Miss and Florida. So, yeah, a tough task this weekend. But if you want to say they're the third best team in the SEC right now, I think you can make an argument for that. But next week's the one I'm looking for to really get a sense of what this Arkansas team is. I think they proved they're better than A&M. I think they'll find out on Saturday. They're not the level of Georgia. That Ole Miss Florida tier, I think, could be very much appropriate for the Razorbacks.
And, man, I mean, I know that JT Daniels is going to be the starter, obviously moving forward no matter what. But who do you think the offense kind of like plays, like gels better with? JT Daniels obviously got the bigger arm, the most upside. But when Stetson Bennett is in there, I mean, here's a guy that played a lot last year, but in JT Daniels' absence, obviously had to play this year because JT Daniels is hurt and still kind of banged up. Do you think Stetson Bennett plays some this game, not because he necessarily has to, but just you want to make sure you're getting him game reps just in case he has to be utilized down the stretch?
I don't worry about reps so much with Bennett, Ben. I think I worry about him in the games where I know Georgia's going to be tested. And right now we have one coming up in late October, or potentially one this week and next week. But I think we know one coming up in Jacksonville and then maybe one down the road in December. So that's where I think you need Daniels because he has a higher ceiling. But no, I don't worry about that with Bennett. I think he's gotten, 5 or 6 starts now over the past year and a half. I think he's pretty comfortable in that Georgia offense. I think the talent around him is comfortable working with him, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Again, Daniels could be banged up where it might require that, and if it does get a bit out of hand, it's probably worth going back to Bennett. But in terms of needing reps for him in case something does go awry with Daniels, that's not really a concern to mine with Bennett, given the amount of football he's played over the last 13, 14 months.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, joining us here on 3 and Out. Matt, Alabama and Ole Miss, Lane and Saban going back at it again. What are you expecting here? I know Ole Miss's defense is better. Couldn't have been much worse. Is it good enough to give them a chance against Alabama?
Yeah, absolutely think they have a chance. And I'm interested to see kind of what Alabama does defensively. Do they kind of sit back and force Ole Miss to be patient and run the ball and take those short passes? And, I think there's a more mature Matt Corral this year. I think there's a more mature Lane Kiffin and Jeff Lebby as play callers, where they'll say, all right, we can run the ball. We got Arian Neely and Stu Connor and Henry Parrish and 3 really good backs. So I think Ole Miss is fully capable of staying patient. And yeah, defensively, I mean, that stat is just crazy last year about the 760 some available yards for Alabama on their 11 drives, and they got all but 40 of them because of one punt. And I think Najee Harris fumbled at the 1 yard line, but just that crazy stat. And I don't think we expect that much efficiency from this Alabama offense, given they've come back to earth a bit from last year and the Ole Miss defense has improved from bad to average. But yeah, it's a fascinating matchup. I think Ole Miss probably needs to get this into the 40s. If it becomes a true shootout where both teams are in the 40s, I think Ole Miss has a chance. I don't think they can win a game 31-20. I just don't think the defense can hold up like that, given some of their depth concerns. But I think this becomes a shootout. And if you are a big believer in Matt Corral as perhaps the best quarterback in the country, we can say the same thing about Cam Newton and Johnny Manziel and Joe Burrow when they were in college. They all 3 won the Heisman, and they all won in Tuscaloosa. So as monumental of a task as winning at Bryant-Denny against Alabama is, we've seen the top quarterbacks in the country go in and do it. And if you believe that is Matt Corral, I think it's hard to argue for anyone else outside of maybe the guy he's facing on Saturday. I don't think picking Ole Miss to win is that outlandish. So I'm expecting a close game. I'm definitely taking the points. I can't quite pull the trigger on an outright win for Ole Miss, but I think we're looking at a 45-38, 45-41 type game, another fun one, and CBS will be absolutely thrilled at the product they're going to get.
Well, Matt, you mentioned the 2 quarterbacks. I believe Bryce Young and Matt Corral are 5th and 6th in the country in passer rating. Who do you think is the better quarterback going into this game?
I think I've just been a little more impressed with Corral, just the maturity. We saw those couple dud games he had last year, and we're only 3 games into their season, so it's not crazy to think he won't have another 4-interception game at some point this year, but he just appears to have a more mature approach to the game, and maybe that's the fact that he has a competent defense. Last year, a failed possession where they didn't get 7 points was doomed because we knew the other offense was going to go right down the field and score on that Ole Miss defense. So, again, I think the maturity of both him and, again, Kiffin and Lebby as play callers has been evident in the first 3 games. They don't have to force everything. So I'm going to give the edge to Corral just because of the experience factor. But what an opportunity for Bryce Young. He's really shined in a couple tough environments so far this season. So first really big home game for him, even as a backup last year with limited crowds there. This will be the first charged up atmosphere for him ever in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So obviously a tough assignment for Corral going in there, but I think some obvious nerves and hopefully no stage fright, but the lights have never been brighter before for Bryce Young in terms of playing in Bryant-Denny. So classic matchup here, but I'm going to go with Corral again, just because of the experience he's gotten over the past year and a half.
And man, what type of effort does it take these days to beat Alabama? It's not like they're unbeaten. You talk about the Bo Nix that beat them in the Iron Bowl, his true freshman year. You talk about a guy in Joe Burrow that had a surrounding cast around him. Talking about the Johnny Manziel, who obviously, you look at his Heisman Trophy type season. A guy like Matt Corral, he's built for this moment. He got the players on offense. I mean, the defense gonna have to play better. He got the play caller in Lane Kiffin. Is this gonna come down to more of Matt Corral and his playmaking ability, or is it gonna have to be more of a team effort 4-quarter type game for them to win this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to need a few stops from the defense. I think they can get those again just because of both units being a bit different than they were a year ago. But I think Corral fits the bill of the quarterbacks that have gone in there and won, pretty similar to Joe Burrow in that he's still going to be throwing out of the pocket. But if he needs to get out of the pocket, make a throw on the run, scramble for 8 on 3rd and 7, I think he's fully capable of doing that. And those are the guys that have had success against Alabama. So they're asking a lot of him. Again, I don't think he needs to be perfect. If they have to settle for a field goal, if he has a 3rd and long where he's got nothing, just throw it in the tuba section and punt and move on. Don't try and force those throws. Give Alabama a short field. Put your defense in a really bad spot. But I think if they are not giving Alabama short fields, they can force a couple punts, maybe a turnover. play a little bit in the red zone, and that's how I think you hold Alabama, and 35, 38 points would make this a winnable game by getting into the 40s. Because even as good as this Alabama defense is, we saw what a good play caller and a quarterback who was feeling it could do in that second half in Florida. So I think Corral's certainly a better passer than Emory Jones, and Kiffin and Levy, I think, are on the same level as Dan Mullen in terms of game day play callers. So all that put together, Ben, I don't know if I necessarily answered your question, but again, going back to my point, this is a very winnable game for Ole Miss, and I'll be pretty surprised if this thing is out of hand by the end of the third quarter.
Matt Smith joining us here on 3 and Out. Matt, so much more to talk to, but we're up against it. I appreciate you coming on and joining us. Thanks so much. We'll talk again soon.
Always fun, guys. Thanks for having me.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, joining us here, talking SEC football. Big weekend, as it usually is in the Southeastern Conference. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the show as we get ready for a big weekend of SEC football, college football. You look at some big storylines in the SEC. We talked Georgia, Arkansas, and Bama and Ole Miss. There are obviously two very big ones there, but you've got some probably those second-tier games that mean a lot. LSU and Auburn this weekend. That's a big one probably for Coach O. That's a big one. Obviously, early on in the Brian Harsin tenure, Bo Nix, I believe, was named the starter this week, BJ. But TJ Finley making his return trip to LSU. Do we see him this week if the Tigers, the Auburn Tigers, struggle in this one?
I think we probably see both quarterbacks, and Finley was the hero last week to beat Georgia State. Now, I know Auburn fans were frustrated that they needed this, but Finley led the Tigers on a 99-yard game-winning drive where he converted a 4th down and 10. And I know some talk about the officials in that game, but Finley provided Auburn with a spark. Bo Nix is going to get the start, but I think you'll see both. And you're right about this being a big game for Coach O. I mean, if LSU loses this game, you have 2 losses already. And Ole Miss is still out there. Alabama's still out there. Florida's still out there. Texas A&M is still out there. I think the expectations probably higher at LSU than Auburn because you do have a new coaching staff with Coach Harsin coming in at Auburn. So this is a big game. And what's interesting, historically, especially lately, Auburn LSU is always close. And you think about the finish of some of those games. You've had, plays that have had to be reviewed. You've had trick plays. You've had made kicks and missed kicks. You've had late defensive stands. So this one is generally close, generally fun, and I think you'll see another exciting game on Saturday.
Yeah, this is going to come down to a who you can trust game. The thing about a guy like Bo Nix, sometimes when it comes to big time, college football, you need to know that you can be benched and you will be benched. Bo Nix is a guy when you look at everything they gave him, new head coach check, new offensive coordinator check, Tank Bigsby, his running game check, and he still seems to be getting back to playing some of that more like sophomore Bo Nix than more of the guy playing within the confines of the system his true freshman year. But yeah, I do think that LSU and Auburn is going to be a better game than people give it credit for. LSU is still trying to find what its identity is as a team, not just on either side of the football. This is going to come down to a battle of wills. I do think that when you think about LSU this week, I mean, I think that they're still trying to get past 2020 as far as like the season that they had, open up the season with a loss. The second game of the year when they go out to UCLA, but I do think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to come down to the matchups. I mean, Derek Stingley Jr. in that defense, how do those guys look? I mean, Bo Nix in that offense. So it's going to be a better game than people give credit for, Kevin and BJ. But I think this is always going to come down to the curious case known as Bo Nix. And if the Bo Nix steps in and he wants to play within the confines of what they're trying to give him, don't try to do too much, they're going to be successful. If he do what he did last week, I think they're going to pull him quicker because now you got a guy in Finley who can not only help you go out there and be competitive, help you actually go out there and win a game.
Yeah, this is probably, again, BJ, if this weren't Bama, Ole Miss, and Georgia, Arkansas this week, this would probably be one of the games to watch in the SEC, and it usually is right up there. Kind of interesting that it's kind of taken a back seat to some other ones this week, but a great matchup there nonetheless. And then the something has to give game coming up. Or maybe it doesn't. Kentucky, undefeated. Florida coming in, 322 rushing yards per game. Kentucky is giving up 200 yards a game on the ground. This could be the turning point in this ball game between Florida and Kentucky. I know Kentucky normally just struggles to beat the Gators in general. I think they've only done it, once or twice in the last 30-plus years. Is this week going to be any different?
Well, you're at home. At night, you're off to an undefeated start. You got a balanced team when you think about the ability to throw the ball with Will Levis and the ability to run the ball, of course, with Chris Rodriguez. And then defensively, you've been really good, had a good performance against South Carolina. Now, you have not been as good as you like stopping the run, and that's a major problem against Florida. You've been good overall defensively, but Florida has been quite dynamic running the football. They're third nationally in rushing, and the only teams, and Kevin, you even called it in the show meeting, the only teams that are ahead of Florida are Army and Air Force. So Florida is running the ball as well as anybody in the country. They can do it with a couple of different guys. Obviously, we'll have to see the availability of Anthony Richardson. But, Ben, I don't know what your gut tells you. I look at this game. I see a close game. And Derek Abney will join us, in about an hour or so. But I think Kentucky's got good balance offensively. I think defensively, they have to improve with the line of scrimmage, but that's a solid group. That's a good group. And I think the atmosphere, I mean, Kentucky fan, look, if you win this game, you're 5-0, you're nationally ranked, and you already have a head-to-head over Florida. I think there's going to be just a lot of emotion out there on the field for the Wildcats.
It is. And if Florida is a team that plays Alabama the best in, the last couple of years, I mean, people get caught up in this rivalry and how lopsided it's been, but Kentucky plays Florida very, very tight. I mean, this is a team that gets up, for Florida every single year. And BJ, you mentioned Chris Rodriguez. I mean, Chris Rodriguez, I think his freshman year, he had like 534 yards the whole season. I think he has like 521 yards currently, this season on like 85 rushes. Very, 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 very efficient with the football. Will Levis and that passing game scares me more than the running game does. But this is going to be a battle of wills. I think Florida does come in with a better defense, which, I mean, couple of seasons ago, you would say Kentucky was the more balanced team. I'm pretty sure Kentucky's been watching the tape saying, listen, if it's 4th down, we need 11 on 11, especially on the goal line if you are Kentucky. But I give this Kentucky team a lot of credit. They found a way to get balance with the run game and the passing game. They're a very, very scrappy bunch, and they're undefeated. You can't talk about who you did play or didn't play or how it came down to it. Play 4 teams, won all 4. It's going to be a really, really good game against 2 teams that naturally don't like each other. It should be fireworks, and every time Florida has to go up there, to the Commonwealth State, it usually is a much better game coming from them Wildcats.
I know we've talked a lot. Jimbo Fisher hot seat potential. Not Jimbo Fisher. Ed Ogeron hot seat potential if they lose again. Another interesting game off the radar. Texas A&M. Do they have the hangover from the Arkansas loss this week? They've got Mississippi State. Not that Mississippi State's a great football team, but it seems like Mississippi State good enough to beat you if you're worried about what happened last week. And, of course, Texas A&M continuing forward with a backup quarterback in Calzada. Is this one maybe more interesting than people think? And if Mississippi State pulls off this upset, do people start looking at Jimbo Fisher going, this was the year you were supposed to contend, and you potentially lost to Arkansas and Mississippi State?
Yeah, I think there'll be a level of frustration there if they lose this game that we have not yet seen. I mean, early on in Jimbo Fisher's tenure at A&M, you thought, okay, it's building something, and the recruiting success validated that. The early success, though not at a national championship level, validated that. And then last year, you were oh so close. I mean, you were the first team out of the college football playoff last year, 5th in the country, and Kellen Mond and Isaiah Spiller, you had a really good team defensively, Buddy Johnson and those guys. Then you're replacing some of those players. You have the early injury to Haynes King. You still have a talented roster. Spiller's still there. Devin Achane. You think about DeMarvin Leal, still a very talented roster. But if you start out with 2 losses this soon, and again, the same thing applies to Texas A&M. You have Alabama out there. I mean, you got to run through the SEC West, and you're doing so with a young quarterback. Offensively, you've underwhelmed. I mean, you go back to that Colorado game, they were probably fortunate to win that Colorado game. So, yes, I think if Texas A&M struggles with Mississippi State, loses this game, there will be people who will be very disappointed and very frustrated.
As well they should be, right? Jimbo Fisher, what did he do in this offseason? Just similar to Nick Saban, similar to Dan Mullen, got a contract extension. And as you mentioned, Kevin, a lot of preseason hype. But the one thing we didn't factor in, we always talking about people replacing, a big shoes to fill. We don't give Kellen Mond enough credit for what he has meant to Texas A&M. I mean, Haynes King is out, and I think what's going to really hurt Texas A&M if they lose this game, people are going to talk about depth. It doesn't matter with these big-time recruiting classes if you don't have quarterbacks that's backups that you can still have everything ahead of you if and when they do go down. Haynes King going down did hurt because obviously your starter gives you the best possible shot, but I still think Mississippi State is dangerous. Mississippi State, they started off the year last year beating LSU and kind of fell off. This could be their marquee win this year. What got Jimbo Fisher his contract since last year? Finally got a big time win against Florida. And BJ, as you mentioned, the first team out. Well, if they lose this weekend, I mean, them Texas A&M alum, they're gonna be, and them boosters gonna be like, look, man, you told me this was the year this year. I already was getting 7.5. I think it's close to $9 million a year. Wow, guys getting $9 million. They're gonna say, look, are we giving you $9 million for $9? Are we giving you $1 million for a win, per win, or are we still trying to contend? So I do think Mississippi State is dangerous. We will see, because if you play DB for Texas A&M, get ready to run a lot, because they are guaranteed to throw the ball around, because that's going to be their strategy. But yes, it's probably going to be a better game than we give it credit for. And if Mississippi State is still in the game in the third quarter, look out, Texas A&M. You might find yourself looking up at an L this week.
Yeah, and again, we've seen it's been a crazy college football season already, BJ. Stranger things have happened if you go to sleep this week. Tennessee, Mizzou, another one nobody's going to really talk about. But if Tennessee wins, that's back-to-back losses for Mizzou, one out of conference, one in conference. When they were talking, hey, maybe we're third in the East here in 2021, would be a big get for Tennessee if they run across a dub in that one as well. So much more to get to here on the show. It's 3 and Out. Jared Binko going to join us in hour number 2. Georgia Southern AD, we'll get the very latest from him. Why did he decide to make the move with Chad Lunsford? What's he looking for in the future? What's the direction he sees for this football program? We'll get to him with that coming up in hour number 2 here on 3 and Out.
through Mitch Hyatt, offensive tackle for Clemson, and Tucson National Championship is for 3 and Out with Dennis Evans.
Good to have you along here, 3 and Out. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, a lot to get to coming up next hour. Jared Binko, Georgia Southern AD, will join us, and we'll talk to him about, obviously, the direction of that program. Chad Lunsford being let go earlier in the week, over the weekend, actually. And BJ, where do you think, before we get to ask the AD himself, Georgia Southern wants to go? Where should they go with this hire?
Well, a lot of candidates being thrown out there when you look at some of the early reports, and the speculation kind of is what it is. I don't know if there's a potential candidate list yet in reality, or if you're evaluating everything kind of day by day, and not to that point. But I think Georgia Southern will want to get a coach that probably either directly has a history of offensive productivity or has ties to an offensive coordinator that has a history of, consistent productivity. I think that's one of the talking points that's always around Georgia Southern football. What is your offensive identity? Is it going to be option based? Is it going to be flex bone based? Is it going to be a spread offense? And you guys were in the show meeting kind of giving me examples of some of the subtle differences, some of the significant differences. I think that'll be a factor. I would imagine, you'll see Georgia Southern at least target some coaches that have executive experience in terms of, you've been a head coach for a while, but I think there are going to be a lot of coaches who are very, very interested in Georgia Southern. It's a great job. It's a high profile job, championship expectations, and it's clearly a place where you can win.
It's going to come down to, you want a guy that has just national name recognition just from who he is and what he's done, as a brand, or do you want to have a guy that's, like you said, BJ, that's going to switch up the offense? Jared Binko, this is going to be the biggest decision he's made since being the AD, at Georgia Southern. I do think he's going to have a lot of suitors, but you also want to make sure you get the guy you coveted. You don't want this to turn into a Tennessee situation where, you getting the 10th guy on the list. You probably got 2, maybe 3 names that you coveted, and you want to make sure you get your best pitch available. I don't think you have to sell Georgia Southern as much as we think you have to, but at the same time, what is the realistic expectations of the coach year one? Because as you guys know, you don't get 2 or 3 years to build these programs. Get a guy that has an offensive philosophy or a big name that obviously everybody that's going to boost the reputation of Georgia Southern. But I do think Jared Binko is going to make the right decision. It's just got to be a calculated one at this point.
And again, obviously, option, no option. Do you need somebody that's kind of fires up an outgoing personal guy? You just need a guy that coaches football. I think there's a number of different ways you could go about that in terms of getting Georgia Southern where they want to be. Obviously, the Sun Belt is getting tougher and tougher and tougher as this thing goes along. So we'll hear from Jared Binko coming up in hour number 2. He'll join us in about 18 minutes or so from right now. And he'll join us here on 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network, also live streaming at ESPNCoastal.com. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. We'll hear from Jared Binko coming up in just a little bit. Also, Derek Abney this hour, former Kentucky All-American, will join us here on the program. We'll talk Kentucky and Florida coming up this week. Also, DJ Shockley, former Georgia quarterback, will join us in the final hour looking at Georgia and Arkansas as well. Now a member of the Georgia Bulldog Radio Network. So he'll join us coming up in the final hour. Now, before we get to Jared Binko, let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. All right, fellas, which Braves batter do you want up in the clutch situations? Braves up 3.5 coming into tonight's ball game with just 5 games to go.
I know Austin Riley's having potentially an MVP type season, but it's still Freddie Freeman for me. So many big hits throughout history, has success in the playoffs, success in the regular season, the reigning MVP himself. And I've been looking at, Kevin, you'll appreciate this. I've been looking at split stats like all day for the Braves offensively, and Freddie Freeman is the leader in just about every category. You know, runners on second and third, 2 outs, late games, whatever. Freddie Freeman's generally at or above 300. So I think his consistency is something you can trust. He's a veteran. He's been in countless big moments. So, look, you can go with a couple guys. Ozzie Albies is really, Adam Duvall, one of the hottest hitters in baseball. But for me, it's Freddie Freeman.
I mean, BJ, don't jump on me. I don't want this to sound blasphemous, but I and this take nothing away from Freddie Free, but I'm going to go with Austin Riley. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, the thing about Freddie Free, BJ, we talking about a guy that might not have any flaws in his game. 0, none. I mean, I know we try to break. I know Freddie Free showed a little bit. And he showed that he was human a little bit this year, going into a little bit of a slump, and obviously he's overcome that. But I'm just thinking about everything. This might be the year of Austin Riley. I'm just thinking about a guy for which had to prove that he can not only, hit a slider or hit a sinker. He had to show that he can be an everyday third baseman. And you look at the season that he's put together just for his psyche, just for his momentum, moving forward in his young career. I still like Austin Riley. He seems to be a guy that's is built for the moment, because obviously BJ Freddie Free is going to be the guy in any category, but for me, I'm gonna go with Austin Riley, a guy that has earned that, earned everything he's gotten this year. And when you talk about MVP candidates on the team, Freddie Free is number 1. I will have Austin Riley's number 2. So give me Austin Riley.
Yeah, it's still Freddie Freeman until proven otherwise. I like that pick, man. But for me, as BJ said, the guy that I feel most comfortable with up there, 2 outs. I need something to happen right now. I don't want anybody else in there other than Freddie Freeman. Now, the beauty of baseball is you don't get to choose who's up there when it's those situations. But if you got to, it would be Freddie Freeman for me as well. Moving along, take 2. Trevor Lawrence has 7 picks in 3 games, or about 2.3 picks a game. Peyton Manning, who has the rookie record with 28 picks in a season, or 1.75 a game. So obviously Trevor Lawrence is ahead of that pace right now. And with an extra game on the schedule, 17 regular season games, will Trevor Lawrence break that rookie interception record?
No, I don't think so. I think he's going to improve. And also keep in mind when you look at those rates, Peyton Manning at 175 and Lawrence at 233 in terms of interceptions a game, those are for Lawrence's first 3 games. So I think with more experience and more familiarity in the National Football League, more chemistry with his, offensive teammates, I think you'll see that rate decrease. So I don't think you're going to see 2.3 interceptions a game when he gets more experience. I also wonder about this, Ben, and you and I were talking about this in the show meeting, man. If Jacksonville is really bad, and I think that's a pretty fair assumption at this point, and you get to late in the season and you have 1 or 2 wins, do you think there's a chance they just shut him down and say, look, we're not going to run the risk of injury carrying in the next season? And if we lose, if we're being honest, you get a higher draft pick anyway. I think there's a chance if Jacksonville is really bad late in the season, meaning 1 or 2 wins, that they just kind of shut it down to keep him healthy for 2021 or later in 2022, I should say, and possibly secure a higher draft pick.
You're going to get a high draft pick no matter what. So you don't have to worry about that. You're going to get a high draft pick. Shutting him down because the season is over, that's called losing football. That's called a losing culture, and that's what's going to make sure you pick it in the top 5 every year. I think he does potentially break the record, Kevin and BJ, for a different reason. Throwing interceptions means that you are, you trust in your arm. You're taking chances. Sometimes you got to take chances. And If he's gonna, if throwing, if breaking Peyton Manning records means he's gonna go on and have a career like Peyton Manning, I can live with that. I mean, nobody's really expecting Jacksonville to do anything significant this season. You got to go through your aches and pains. But I do think that if he does break the interception record, it won't be the end all be all. It would just show how much he lacks around him, show how much confidence he has in himself, and show that look, man, that means I trust my guys more than the guys I'm going up against. So I do think he's probably gonna get right there to it, if not breaking it, because in the National Football League now, to where they throw the football so much, you're just going to throw more picks just because of the attempts you have. It might not necessarily be an indicator of the player. Well, I still think Trevor Lawrence has a big time future. I think he's learning how to play the game of football by losing. This is the first time he's ever lost in his life, him and Urban. So they both learned it, but no, don't shut him down if the season is over. You won one game last year, so so if you win one this year, you've already tied from last year. Then you got to get win number 2. But no shutting nobody down. I do think he breaks the record.
I think it'll be close, but I think so many times you're cognizant of those things that you might shut him down before he gets to it, just for the psychological reasons of not breaking the record. We shall see. Finally, take 3. It's World Coffee Day. Christian wants to know, coffee is at its best when blank.
Hot. I mean, that's kind of if we're filling in the blank. Coffee is at its best when hot. I mean, that was my first thought.
We have a couple of guys who will drink coffee 24/7 in this office. Christian and PJ, they are kings of the 4 o'clock cup of coffee around here. I
mean, coffee to me is best left on the shelf. I'm not a coffee dude. If I'm drinking coffee, something has gone very, very wrong. But let me tell you something. Coffee to me serves as I hope I can say that, as a laxative to me. If I drink some coffee, you better be somewhere else. Because when that stomach get to bubbling, I got to go. I'm just telling you right now. So I am not a coffee drinker. BJ, look what? I'm just saying, BJ, I don't drink no coffee. And now y'all drink coffee cold and on ice, and people just be sipping it. I mean, the iced coffee be the biggest cups you ever seen. They be like, the cup be like bigger than the person who's drinking it face. I'm not a coffee drinker. I'm sorry. I'm not hitting down coffee day, but yes, if my stomach needs some release, I'm gonna drink some coffee, and you better be somewhere else. I mean, I'm trying to tell you. Shout out to John Witherspoon. May he rest in peace. If you've ever seen Friday 2 when he said the hot sauce on my burrito, well, when he was in traffic, that's how I'm gonna be if I'm drinking that coffee. So for me, it's if I need to, clear out the tummy, if you know what I mean. That's the only way I'm drinking coffee.
Wow. Coffee is at its best when it's poured down the drain. I will agree. Not a fan of coffee at all. Don't drink it. And if I was in a desert and all I had was coffee or sand, I'd have to think about it for a minute before I made my decision. Thank you, Christian. We'll come back. Jared Binko, that's take 3. Jared Binko, Georgia Southern AD, will join us next here on 3 and Out. Good to have you here, Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Our next guest has certainly been a busy week there in Georgia Southern, and Athletic Director Jared Binko kind enough to join us here on 3 and Out. And Jared, thanks so much for giving us some time here on the show. Obviously, as I said, a busy week for you. What ultimately kind of led to the decision to make a change of head coach just 3-4 weeks into the season?
Yeah, I mentioned on Monday, Kevin, it was just really, I've had a year and a half to review our program. Been at every game, at a lot of practices. I've gotten to know a lot of our student athletes and obviously coaches and staff. And, comprehensively, I just felt there was time for a change. And, this obviously, as tough as these decisions are with Coach Lunsford, and again, he's a credible man, incredible person. Dad and husband, these are, gut-wrenching decisions. But it was the right one, and ultimately that's what I'm charged with for all 17 sports, is trying to, obviously compete for championships and also develop young men and women of character. And I just felt it was the best time to do it.
And I know you've mentioned a number of different factors came into play with evaluation. We saw the video of the student athlete on top of the bus. Was that part of the decision-making process? Was that a factor in this?
Yeah, everything up through Saturday afternoon was factored in. Obviously, just that type of behavior is not acceptable here, and it's something that obviously is being dealt with. But again, when you look at a year and a half, there wasn't a flashpoint incident. It was just ultimately, and really competitively, we have aspirations to be a lot better, and we have aspirations to not only be the top school in the Sun Belt, but among the elite of the group of 5, and we were getting there. And there's things obviously on the field and off the field you're always observing, and there's some things that ultimately didn't sit well with me, and decided to make the change.
And Jared, I mean, obviously, the young man Gavin Adcock. I'm not here to pile on the young man, but how much do you take from the situation to kind of use as a teaching moment for these student athletes? Because I know it's a lot more pressure under them, but bigger than them being student athletes, they're brand ambassadors. I know that's something that I didn't understand even when I was at the University of Florida. But how do we use this as a teaching moment for these young people to say, listen, you talked about evaluation a year and a half, but the evaluation process never, ever stops in athletics.
No, I mentioned that the other day about it. Every day is an evaluation. Listen, Ben, you and I have talked before. I mean, we all have, and I have an awesome responsibility. And as much as we want to win in everything we do, I really enjoy pouring into our student athletes. And sometimes that's, when things don't go well, and sometimes that's celebrating the graduations, championships, and big wins. And so, there's different ways. It comes down to relationships, right? And it comes down to relationships with student athletes. And so, listen, Gavin and I had a conversation that's private between him and I on Sunday evening. And listen, he's a great young man and made a bad decision. And what I've always taken is you want to have grace, right? I'm not in the business of burying people and trying to just make sure that they can't recover. I think listen, it's a great opportunity for Gavin to learn from this, and all of our student athletes. Listen, I make mistakes all the time, still do it now, and make mistakes. I know when I was 18 and 22 years old, and I think that if you don't look at just this one incident, you look at incidents with student athletes, they're going to make decisions that you always don't always agree with, and maybe don't fit into the culture. But you have to help them learn from it and help them grow from it. And there's a difference between grace and mercy, and really is trying to offer grace and help him learn from this, because he is a great young man, and want to continue to help him obviously make an impact, not only this team, but hopefully, obviously get a degree here and have a successful life once his football days are over with.
Jared Binko, Georgia Southern Athletic Director, joining us here on 3 and Out. And Jared, what are you looking for from the next head coach? Is it anything in particular? I know offense gets talked about a lot at Georgia Southern. What are you kind of looking for in that next head guy?
I'll tell you, it's been exciting even the last day and a half or so. The candidate pool is already, starting to be built out, have a ton of interest. Not surprised by that. We think it's a tremendous job, tremendous opportunity. I think it is important not to get focused on one style of play, offensively and defensively. And I know some people are like, what does a CEO mean? It means ultimately, as y'all know, there's people that have made a great transition from being assistant coach and a coordinator, a head coach, and there's some that haven't. There's a lot of great coaches out there. what I'm trying to find is somebody that fully understands the expectations and demands of being the head coach here, obviously in Statesboro. And it's a tall task and it's a great job. And it's something that I think is going to attract the biggest and brightest coaches. So to me, it goes without saying, integrity, someone that's been part of winning teams, winning cultures, obviously a great developer of young men, great relationship builder as well. Has to be a relentless recruiter. I can go on and on and on, but I think to me, the piece that I keep coming back to is they have to understand all the things that go into running a program. And listen, sometimes the X's and O's and actually is the easiest part. It's the stuff that's off the field. It's handling crucial conversations with student athletes, right? It's helping them understand and learn from mistakes, right? It's also dealing with all the external factors of donors and boosters and fans and alumni and speaking engagements and all that type of stuff that they don't tell you about when you're moving up the ladder per se. And I think sometimes you learn that baptism by fire, and sometimes you get groomed to do that. And I'm looking for people that are ready to step in, and can obviously assume that position and be successful right out of the gate.
Coach Kevin Whitley takes over in an interim role. What does he mean to the program?
Oh, he's huge. Listen, Coach Whitley's salt of the earth. Just a tremendous man, tremendous husband, tremendous dad. Listen, he knows what Georgia Southern football is about. And so people say, well, how'd you get to Coach Whitley? It was pretty easy to me. When you think about, he has the attributes that you want in person of influence, or a head coach in this case. 2, he was an All-American here. He understands the expectations. He understands that our expectations, we're coaching and leading to them. And we have the bars really high. And listen, he's a firm believer in discipline, and I am too. And I want all our coaches in our program to run disciplined programs. And so, to me, we're very blessed and very fortunate to have someone like him on staff. And listen, that's not a slight. We have some other great coaches as well. We have a great staff. And listen, I'm really excited about Saturday. I said before, every Saturday brings hope and optimism for a win, and you're going and you're continuing to look forward to this week and next Saturday and so on and so on. But we have a lot to play for. And so Coach Whitley is going to position our guys to have success, and I'm fired up for Saturday.
Jared Benko, Georgia Southern Athletic Director, our guest here on 3 and Out. Jared, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Sure, guys. Listen, y'all doing well. Ben, congrats on the book, man. Just remember the small people, all right?
Hey, listen, Jared, at the end of the day, man, listen, man, them 100 copies that you just bought for me, man, that's why I love you, man. I got yours coming in the mail. But
Kevin and BJ said they're trying to get rid of your books. I don't know what that meant. So I hope it gets
We'll try to get rid of as many copies as we can. Jared, we appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, see you guys.
Appreciate it again. Really appreciate him joining us here on the program. Obviously, that decision made over the weekend to move on from Chad Lunsford. Talked about some of the qualities he's looking for in the next head coach. And we talked off air. Obviously, it's a job where the Sun Belt up-and-coming conference still, I think this year, a lot of people really thought they were going to push maybe to be the number 6, the top G5 conference out there. I don't know if they're quite there yet, but they're trying to make that push. And Jared saying, look, we have a level we want to stay at, we want to get to and compete at, and didn't feel they were getting there.
Well, and you think about, potential candidates. This is going to be a job that attracts a lot of people. This is going to be a job that has appeal all over the country. Georgia Southern has had some very successful stretches as an FBS name. You think about the history, over the last, couple of generations. Have done things that have not been done. 6 national championships at the FCS level. Some of the greatest players in the history of the game. Tracy Ham, Adrian Peterson, Jason Foster, just a number of all-time greats. And I think you think about a program that expects to win, expects to compete for championships. And I think that will, that's always the standard at Georgia Southern. I think that'll continue to be, but I think that this will be a job that a lot of people are very interested in for sure.
I think sometimes we forget just how much pressure it is to be the head coach at Georgia Southern. I think Jared Benko just showed us. He said, look, the X and O's is not the problem. It's all the things you have to deal with away from the field. But I do think he's going to have, some guys that's really looking forward. Because, BJ, you talk about the tradition. Look, in the state of Georgia, obviously the University of Georgia is the biggest brand, the most tradition-rich program. That is Georgia Southern, and that's not taking a slight to Georgia or Georgia Tech or any other school in the state. So I do know that that Jared Binko understands, or whoever takes the job understands that, listen, the seat is hot not because of the guy you're replacing, but because of what's the expectation moving forward. But yeah, man, I mean, everybody hear about Paulson, everybody hear about GATA. It's different when you the guy that, when you the guy that got to wear that hat. But I do think it's going to be exciting times coming to Statesboro here real soon.
And again, we've seen now Chad Lunsford, I believe, was the third coach to be dismissed or say they weren't coming back already this season, a month in. And Ben talked a little bit about the timetable being moved up. I know there's a recruiting deadline up there in December where you get the early signing period, but obviously while the season's going on, it's going to be tough to get somebody who's already on another staff to commit and say, yep, I'm going to be the head coach in October, and then finish out where they're at for the next 3 months and recruit and do all that. So how do you kind of look at the timetable as to why we're seeing more and more teams kind of say, 2, 3, 4 weeks into the season? Nope, sometimes that's enough. We heard that about Ed Ogeron. A lot of people saying had he lost last week, that might have just cranked the temperature up on his seat, where maybe week 4 or 5, he could have been potentially done at LSU. Why do you think we're seeing that timetable just moved up so early in the season, where it used to be, look, we're not going anywhere, we're going to play out the string and we're going to cut ties at season's end? Now it's, hey, 2 weeks into the season, if we don't like it, click, we'll get by with an interim and move on.
Yeah, I think the early recruiting period that you referenced, definitely has something to do with it. But I think you'll see Jared Binko and Georgia Southern, take their time and consider their options and, evaluate the rest of this season. Jared Binko mentioning, his excitement for the Arkansas State game, and you still have some really high profile games with national kind of relevancy coming up. A number of them will be in Statesboro. So I think you'll see Georgia Southern, be patient, be deliberate, take their time. And in terms of when a decision is made, I think some of that is fluid. I think it's hard to say with great conviction right now, oh, it will make sense if they do this, or oh, it will make sense if this is the date. I think some of that is still up in the air and will be fluid throughout this season.
I think what it says at the end of the day, Kevin and BJ, is the fact that FBS, FCS, it really doesn't matter, man. The expectation is the same. We expect you to come in here and compete for division championships and national championships. And if you're not doing that, especially when you're at a tradition-rich school, we got to move on, whether it's tradition of a USC, or whether it's a tradition of a Georgia Southern. We try to separate the two. There is no separation. And it's what it says to the other coaches. It's not the coaches that's gotten fired. It's the guys that still got jobs saying, wait, but they did that to him, yes, and they'll do that to you too. So I respect it, because at the end of the day, these coaches understand that they are the biggest part of the business. They are the biggest face, and as Jared Binko said, they are the CEO, and I'm sorry, people, they get paid to leave. So at the end of the day, they still winning. I mean, I wish the Coach Lunsford was still there, but I think Mrs. Lunsford said we still get our money right. Yeah, baby, we still get the check and still get cash.
I think Georgia Southern, and it was out there from what I've seen reported, Georgia Southern still owes Chad Lunsford $1.4 million at the end of the day. So he will be, as you said, getting taken care of on the way out of the door as well. We've got so much more to get to here on 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.
Welcome back to 3 and Out. I am Ben Troop, Kevin Thomas, BJ Bennett, and listen, big games on the schedule this week in the SEC. Our next guest is a guy that really, really needs no introduction. I mean, I had I want to say the pleasure and the privilege of playing against this incredible athlete back in 2002 when he did it, when he gave you the hat trick, punt return for a touchdown, kick return for a touchdown, receiver touchdown, first team All-American as a punt returner, kick returner, first team All-American as a receiver, the great Derek Abney. What's going on with you today, Derek?
Oh, I'm doing great, Ben. As always, I'm glad to be on with you.
Now, Derek, man, let's just jump right into it, man. I mean, Florida, Kentucky, big time rivalry. Obviously, I don't really get caught up in what has or hasn't happened in the last 30 or 40 years. I mean, what is your memories of this rivalry, and how are you liking this Kentucky team this year that's got back to running and throwing the football?
You're right. It is a big rivalry, and Ben, I am up on the 30 or 40 years, and how long it's been since we have beaten y'all at home. It's been forever, man. So looking forward to this opportunity to be undefeated, playing a great Florida rushing offense, top 10 team. It's going to be electric on Kroger Field in the evening on Saturday. I'm just really stoked and ready to go.
Derek, talk about this game, an opportunity to have a top 10 team, obviously in Lexington, Kentucky, one of their best starts in recent memory in SEC play. What's the energy and the excitement like, and what's the atmosphere going to be like Saturday night?
Well, it's going to be wonderful. I had the opportunity to go to the South Carolina game this weekend in Columbia and got to see them up close and personal, and the defense was just fantastic, and we're going to need it. Up front, it's been I think we're a little loose than I'd hoped we would be this year, but still a solid defensive team. And there were some hits that I'm really looking forward to seeing Saturday. Offensively for Kentucky, we've opened up the passing game a little bit. So really looking forward to having what's his name catch some passes. You may know him as Wan'Dale Robinson, number 1 for us. So I'm just looking forward to the clash. It's going to be a tough one. I think Florida is 8.5 points, and probably deservedly so. But really looking forward to it.
Derek, what is it like having you look at what Will Levis is doing this year? I mean, really, lighting up, throwing the football. You look at Chris Rodriguez and what he brings to the running game, but you had a guy like a Jared Lorenzen. May he rest in peace, man. A left-handed guy that can really throw the football. What does it mean to you as a receiver, knowing that I got a guy that can get me the football, but I also got a complimentary run game that, we got balance on our offense?
Well, you said it, balance, and you can't stack the box for the run for Chris Rodriguez, who continues to do well, provided he holds on to the ball. And then Will Levis has thrown some beautiful deep balls to Wan'Dale Robinson, who had 3 straight games of 100-plus yards, leading receiver in the SEC by yards. So it gives us options and makes Florida prepared 2 ways. So that just it helps tremendously to not be just a run-oriented big blue wall running offense.
Derek, speak to what you've seen from Coach Stoops developing this program. I know he's had some ups and downs in terms of, was he going to stick? Was he going to ride it out? Was he on the hot seat? Kentucky is stuck with him, and it seems like the consistency at which Kentucky plays has risen along with him to where we've had people on this offseason say, hey, Kentucky could be a legit number 3 in the East, maybe contending to bump Florida off. Your impressions of Coach Stoops and how he's developed and grown this program, which for many years, a lot of people said, well, it's basketball first, and then we'll think about football.
Well, he's done a great job recruiting. He's had consistent wins. I think we've done 4 bowl games and won 3 in a row, or maybe 5 bowl games in a row. I don't think he's ever really been on the hot seat because, like you said, we're a basketball school. Coach Stoops does it right. Mitch Barnhart's the AD there, just a fantastic administrator. So, Coach Stoops is the long game, and he's been here doing it a long time, and he'll be here as long as he wants to be if he continues to produce like this. I think you're right. Maybe number 3 in the East. We've beaten Florida once and several times. Georgia, it's been a goose egg for him. So I think the next step for Mark, obviously, is to beat Florida at home again and Georgia, and see if we can move up in the East.
You mentioned that Kentucky's a basketball school, but this football profile is growing considerably. As one of the great players in the history of the program, how much pride do you take in seeing Kentucky being talked about nationally, having spotlight games like Saturday night? What does that mean to you?
It's wonderful. You know, I'm glad to have been a part of Kentucky. Obviously, I was well before Coach Stoops and his program, so all kudos to him. And they just are doing us proud, to play in a league like this and to still be as successful as he is. And arguably, like you said, the top 3 team in the East. It's just wonderful to bleed blue, honestly.
And Derek, you were a guy that had tremendous success, at Kentucky. And you look at now, like, obviously when you go to a school, you obviously rooting for your alma mater. You want to make sure those guys are still trending up. I know that Kevin talked a little bit about, Coach Stoops, but what does it mean to be a Kentucky Wildcat? I know that you guys got a fierce rivalry, in that state, but I just think that when you think about Kentucky football, I play with some guys that that started in Florida, ended up there, man. They always say, look, man, we play a different brand of football, but we'll play. Listen, they always say we respect everybody, but we fear no one.
Well, the nice thing about Kentucky is, the fans are just fantastic, and they travel anywhere and everywhere. And if you played for Kentucky, whether it's basketball or football, it's just a great, brotherly feeling with all your alumni and your fans. And so, just super proud that we have a program like that for all sports, and it's a special college in a state that that's their primary sport. There's no other professional sports. It's basketball and football, and so that is something special, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Derek Abney joining us here on 3 and Out. And again, speaking of that Kentucky tradition of quarterbacks and throwing the football back in the day, and seems like they're starting to get back to that. What do you think is kind of the best brand of Kentucky football to play to consistently try to get to that SEC championship game if you want to get there?
Well, I think you got to have a great defense, and Coach Stoops has always made that a focus. It keeps you in the game, and with a balanced attack, then you can score points 2 different ways. And that's really kind of a winning formula. I know speed is the SEC, and you're going to have athletes, and you're going to have to recruit properly. But this choice to mix it up in both ways and still make defense your primary focus, I think is a winning formula.
Derek, there are a few things more exciting to watch in college football than a big kickoff return or punt return. You did it, countless records. Take us into the mindset. We've talked with Ben about this, and Ben's on one of your highlights, but he's not the focal point. But what's it like when you have
bringing that one up again, Ben?
My whole phone crashed, so I got to go talk to my cell phone provider.
See, I wasn't even going in that direction, Ben. But what's the mindset like to be a return specialist and to basically get the ball, see the whole field, and have everybody in front of you running as fast as they can your way?
It's really.
We may have lost Derek there for a second. Ben, all your talk about I was schemed crashed his phone, apparently.
No, man, Derek was an incredible talent. He really, really was. Derek Abney was one of those guys to where, he was great at 2 different areas. BJ, we talked about him being a great receiver. He was also a great return specialist. So, yeah, D. Abney was a guy that, I mean, when people talk about the more you can do, that's how great punt returner, great kick returner, great receiver, a consensus All-American, 2-time first-team All-SEC. I mean, when you talk about the pantheon of great players in SEC, regardless of school, regardless of position, you got to talk about Derek Abney because he did it in the special teams game. He did it in the receiving game, and obviously he got to put I don't know what his best game was, but I got to experience one of them. In 2002, punt return, touchdown, kick return, touchdown, receiving, touchdown. So, AD Abney, man, I mean, keep doing what you're doing, man. I mean, I was going to be, special teams All-American, then you messed that up when I got blindsided. So I appreciate that.
Hey, man, well, I'm glad I can do my part in that, Ben. But as always, thanks for having me on the show. Enjoyed it and looking forward to this weekend.
Absolutely. Hey, Derek, before you let you go, Ben always says he was schemed. Did you guys work it up in a meeting to go hit number 84 on the kick return?
Oh, yeah, he was the primary guy, man. We knew he was coming for us, so we had to probably put 2 or 3 on him. That's how we scored. I mean, if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have scored.
Hey, listen, Derek, man, I appreciate the kind words, man. Listen, at the end of the day, when I saw you on that kickout return, I saw you running away from guys that run 4.4 and 4.3s, and when they came to the sideline, I was like, is he really that fast? They was like, wait till they punted to him, and they punted it to you, and then you was telling the band, hey, man, get ready because I'm about to make a house call. And I was like, you know what, man, who was this Abney kid, man? He need to pull a hamstring or something. And he scored a touchdown. I'm like, man, this dude can do it all. But no, man, it was a blessing and humbling to share the field with you, big time.
Hey, I loved it too, man. Thank you much.
Appreciate it. Derek Abney, our guest here on 3 and Out, Kentucky All-American, and can do it in a number of ways. We'll come back with more here on 3 and Out. Good to have you here, 3 and Out, on this Wednesday. DJ Shockley will join us coming up at the top of the final hour of the program. Do want to make a little correction. I mentioned the Chad Lunsford buyout, $800,000. I apologize. That is the correct number. $800,000 is what Georgia Southern owes Chad Lunsford there on the buyout. But DJ Shockley going to join us coming up in the final hour of the program, and certainly Georgia, Arkansas coming up this weekend. A bigger game than I think a lot of folks thought it was going to be a couple of weeks ago, and a team that offensively in Arkansas really rolling, coming in against one of the nation's best defenses.
It's amazing how quickly this game has become a national spotlight game. Not only a game with SEC implications, but national implications. I mean, Georgia right there at number 2, of course, Arkansas in the top 10. And yes, when I look at this matchup, I think the idea of Georgia's offense versus Arkansas's defense being the focal point is not where I would look. I think I want to look at Arkansas offensively against Georgia's defense. And Georgia leads the nation in just about every major statistical category defensively. If they're not number 1, they're in the top 5, lead the nation in total defense, in scoring defense. And I think the goal for Arkansas is not, can we have a 500-yard day? That's not going to happen. The goal for Arkansas is not, can we have 3 or 4 12-play drives? That's not going to happen. I think the question, and what's going to determine if we have a competitive game in the fourth quarter on Saturday, is can Arkansas hit the home run plays? Because when you're playing an elite defense, whether it's Alabama, whether it's Georgia, you've got to get those chunk gains of 40, 50 yards. And Treylon Burks has 2 receptions of 80 yards or more already. He's one of the most exciting playmakers in the country. So I think the game is most interesting when Arkansas is on offense. And I think the matchup to watch, Ben, is going to be Treylon Burks against probably Darion Kendrick more often than not on the perimeter. And I think that's going to be one of the best receiver corner matchups we see all season.
Can you bully a bully? I mean, the thing about the Georgia defense, I mean, Georgia defense plays as if they the only show in town. I mean, I know they got JT Daniels in that offense and Stetson Bennett and all the running backs. I know that Darnell Washington is back, but Kevin and BJ. I mean, if you are Arkansas, there isn't a bigger challenge, and I mean this respectfully. There isn't a bigger challenge defensively that you're going to face all year, and that's taking nothing away from Alabama, LSU, and Auburn. So I think that this week it's going to come down to, listen, man, can we? I mean, and my coach said this. My coach said, do you know what the word offensive means? It means being disrespectful. Like, you coming at people. And so you're that type of player. That's why we go this way. That's why we're going forward. How disrespectful is and I don't mean like just talking trash to him. I'm just saying, how can we bully our way, to get our offense in gear? Because Georgia is going to try to stop the run, and they're going to make you one-dimensional. Now, it's one thing Treylon Burks going out there catching passes, BJ, when you got the complement of the run. It's another thing when that's all you got. That means safeties are backing up. That means Darion Kendrick can play more aggressive because I got a safety over the top. So the key to Arkansas is do not allow the running game to be eliminated. Jordan Davis, he's really, 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 really big. He's going to be right there in front of that center. That center's going to come out the huddle, and they're going to say, oh, here I am. So if you are Arkansas, look, my senior year, freshman quarterback, going to Death Valley, whoa, and it gets rough. But this is the thing. When all you got is each other, you play better. Hey, man, hostile environment, and don't nobody expect us. When nobody expects you to do anything but show up and hopefully, not get embarrassed, you can go out there and play loose. Now, it's easy for me to say that now. When I was in college a long time ago, but I do think that if Arkansas can just run the football just to stay balanced, you might not have success with it, because if you get down by 14 and now you got to throw, that bodes well for a very, very opportunistic Georgia defense that Kevin and BJ, I know it was Vanderbilt last week, but my God, 70-something yards of total offense, that's impressive. I don't care who it is. Even Vanderbilt was like, what did they say? We don't make excuses here. Well, you're going to have to do better than that. It's going to be a longer for Arkansas if they can't run the football effectively.
And again, how big, I know it's coming right off of College Game Day, but how big of an advantage is it that it's noon and maybe not that 3:30, 6:30, 7:30 game there in Athens?
Yeah, I think that matters some. I do. I think when you're playing at home at night, the emotion, the excitement is turned up a little bit more. Now, I think it'll still be a very special atmosphere, and home field advantage in college football is significant. It's a major advantage. But I do think that's a fair point, that maybe playing at 12 everybody's just, coming to the stadium maybe a little late, just woke up a couple of hours ago. And that's a little bit different than sitting around all day and tailgating and then having that nighttime atmosphere where it's a little cooler. So I think that matters. I think that's a factor. But to me, what happens early? That's where I'm looking. If Arkansas comes out and has some success first couple of drives, I think that gives them confidence that, okay, we can play with these guys and beat these guys. Conversely, I think if Georgia comes out, dominates defensively, gets a couple of big plays offensively, and builds up an early lead, especially given that would likely make Arkansas one-dimensional, I think that would be very tough for the Razorbacks to overcome.
Arkansas can't get frustrated with the first or second quarters when you're talking about a Georgia team that can find a way to be very, very stingy on defense. But if you are cataloging that defensive defense for Arkansas, BJ, do you create some opportunity for a Georgia offense that's, while they've been good, they haven't been great. They don't really have an established identity. And who knows, if JT Daniels don't play well, do they pull him for a Stetson Bennett? So I think this game has way more intrigue than we give it credit to. Obviously, Georgia is the better team. I mean, Georgia going to be the better team most teams they go up against. But if you're Arkansas, this is the test, Kevin, to be able to say, okay, if we are not just a top 10 team because somebody had to be a top 10 team, or we really a contender that's getting ready for this gauntlet known as the SEC West schedule.
And again, a big game coming up in Athens, one of a couple there in the SEC this weekend with Alabama, Ole Miss, a big national profile football game there as well. We'll hear from DJ Shockley, former UGA quarterback, coming up when we return here in the final hour of the program. It's 3 and Out. Hit us up on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, comments as well. What about Georgia and Arkansas this weekend? Where does Georgia have to control the game to get this win over Arkansas? Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. You can also watch us streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. If you missed any portion of the show, you can go to our YouTube page or Spotify, Apple Podcasts, ESPNCoastal.com. Get the podcasted version of the show each day. Final hour of 3 and Out coming up. When we return, DJ Shockley joins us. Good to have you back here. Final hour of 3 and Out. Kevin, BJ, and Ben getting ready for Georgia and Arkansas coming up this Saturday. College game day going to be on hand for the big atmosphere, and what a huge game this has turned out to be. Just 4 weeks into the college football season. And joining us here, former Georgia quarterback, now with the Georgia Bulldogs radio network, and a sports anchor there for Fox 5 in Atlanta. DJ Shockley joins us here on 3 and Out. DJ, welcome. How are you?
Hello, it's always good to be on with you guys. Doing great. How about yourself?
Hey, we are doing fantastic, and it's amazing what can happen in 3 or 4 weeks of a college football season, right? Nobody expected Arkansas to be any big deal. People are saying, look, after the Clemson game, Georgia's schedule looks kind of suspect at times, maybe Florida down there, and here we are. College game day national focus is on Georgia, Arkansas, a top 10 matchup.
Yeah, I guarantee you, when you came into this season, nobody expected game day to be at Georgia, Arkansas at noon in Athens. But Arkansas has played well. You got to give them a lot of credit. I mean, the 2 big wins they had versus Texas and Texas A&M primetime games showed up and played really well. Obviously, everybody expected Georgia to be in this position, one of the top teams in the country, and they're playing like it. But to have this kind of matchup this early in the season, it's pretty fun to be around. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be tuned in for it to see if Arkansas is really for real. But I think they are a really good ball club. I can't lie. They're a good team. They're doing a lot of good things. And Sam Pittman has these guys playing at a high level, and they're believing.
And DJ, Arkansas really good defensively, of course. What do you think the game plan is going to be from Georgia's perspective, where you probably want balance, I would guess, but what do you think some of the priorities are going to be offensively against a good defense like Arkansas?
You know, I think the number one thing is knowing Barry Odom like I do. I had a chance to call a bunch of their games last year and then watching what he's done this year. They always prided themselves on getting to the football, being physical, guys that fly around, but also not trying to give up those big plays. And I think over the years, that's what's hurt Arkansas is they've given up these 30, 40, 50-yard chunk plays. Now, last year we saw them, everybody knows the drop 8 coverage and keeping everything in front of them. And I think that's kind of similar to plan I think they will have to come into this ball game with against Georgia is you can't let them get over your head. You look what Georgia's done the last 2 or 3 ball games. They've thrown the football down the field. They're stretching the field vertically. They put a lot of pressure on defenses, and that's because a lot of teams are coming in playing quarters, or they're playing some type of man coverage, and Georgia's running right by guys. Todd Monken is doing a really good job of, by formation, getting guys open. But I think coming to this game, Georgia has to obviously be a big emphasis on the run game. Arkansas is big in the run game as well. They played really well against the run this season. Got some transfers in their front seven that really played well. They got some seniors on this ball club that played a lot of football for them. So being in this ball game won't be anything to them. But for Georgia, I think it's the same kind of MO. You got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to complete passes and stay out of third and long. And I think Arkansas coming to this game, they're going to play more coverage than I think a lot of teams have done. I think they'll go back and look at their Clemson tape and say, hey, Clemson played a lot of too high. They played a lot of shell coverage to try to force JT Daniels to be patient, force the Georgia offense to methodically move the football down the field and try to do it. So I expect Arkansas to do something similar.
JT Daniels obviously been banged up a little bit this year, DJ, and then you think about a guy, like Stetson Bennett, who, started last year. He seems to be a guy that just stays ready whenever you call, his number is called. A game like Arkansas, obviously JT Daniels is gonna get most of the reps, but do you still play Stetson Bennett just from a momentum standpoint? Because obviously you play, the same time as David Green. And I understand sometimes, they made sure both of you guys got in. Do you think that's good for an offense, or do you just think you kind of let the game dictate who goes in?
True. I think you and I both know the answer to that. I think Stetson Bennett does not come into this ball game unless JT Daniels cannot play or isn't able to play. I think we saw it 2 games ago where, JT was having a really good ball game, just took the team down the field a couple times, got a couple scores. Stetson comes in, throws interception. Yeah, Stetson's a good player for him, man. He's been dependable. He's been a guy that you can lean on in tough times. But in a game like this, you got to stick with the guy who is your starter. And I don't see any reason why you bring in a guy like Stetson for this ball game. It's not like they're totally different. Now, Stetson can move a little bit better than JT, but they're not like total polar opposites where one guy is a athlete that can run and move and all that kind of stuff, and one's a pocket passer. I don't see you bringing in Stetson anything for just to say, hey, let's get this guy some reps. Yeah, he's earned some time on the field, but he's also earned JT's earned the right to be the starter and not be taken out. So I expect JT to go a whole way regardless of what's going on this week. I know he's had some stuff going on with his lat, and Kirby's talked about that a little bit. But if JT can go and he's healthy enough to go, then he's your guy. You don't do any kind of switching out with him or Stetson Bennett.
DJ Shockley joining us here on 3 and Out. And DJ, you talked about Georgia's defensive effort. It's been so good all season long, but it would appear that this would be the best offense they have played all year. Coming in Arkansas, Clemson obviously not one of the better offenses in college football. The numbers have bore that out here early on. What do you expect to see from this Georgia offense? Because to this point, it's been nothing but just complete and utter domination on that side of the ball. Is this a team that's going to push them offensively, meaning that Georgia defense?
I think that Arkansas will provide some stuff that's absolutely has caught the eye of this defense. And obviously it starts with KJ Jefferson. I know he got banged up a little bit last week, but he did come back in, and I expect him to play in this ball game. I mean, you think about this is his first real opportunity to beat the guy. You get to go on the road. Like you mentioned, game day's going to be there. There's top 10 opponent on the road. You got your team in a great spot. I expect to see him. And he's totally different from what Georgia saw in week one as far as what style of quarterback. Everybody knows that DJ Uiagalelei was a big guy, but he wasn't the same kind of guy that KJ Jefferson is. I think he is a more physical guy behind the center. He wants to go and run the football. He's looking for dudes to go and, put his shoulder down and run. So it's going to be interesting to see how Georgia plays him. But, yeah, absolutely. You think about what he could do from the quarterback spot, and he's thrown it around really well as well. But also you think about, obviously, what they got on the outside, probably one of the top receivers that they will see all year long in Treylon Burks. He's got 19 catches on the year, and the next closest guy is 7. And it's crazy to say this, but they use him the same way Georgia uses James Cook. But instead, Burks is 6'4" out there, and he's been in the backfield. He's in the slot. They sit him on reverses. They sit him on go routes. I mean, he is the total package for him. They will absolutely try to get him the football. So Georgia has to do a good job of first knowing how to defend KJ Jefferson in the backfield, make sure he doesn't hurt you with his feet. But also you have to know where Treylon Burks is, because he can absolutely be a game wrecker for you and change the game.
Georgia, obviously Arkansas this weekend, then Auburn, then Kentucky, then Florida, all good teams nationally ranked. What's that challenge like, DJ, of playing in the SEC? And it's not just one big game, 2 big games, but tough games in consecutive weeks, really, once you settle into conference play.
It's a grind, bro. I tell you, man, it's one of those things that you look forward to, because obviously you come to a school like a Georgia or Florida or Auburn, whatever it is, you expect to play in these big games week in and week out. And I think that's why everybody looks at the SEC like that premier conference, because every week you turn around, after you get a big win, your reward is another big game. And I think Sam Pittman said it the best after their big win last week versus Texas A&M. He said, hey, we turn right back around, and we got to play Georgia. We got to play Ole Miss. We got to play Auburn. So it never stops. So you can't just be satisfied with one big win, because guess what? Here comes another big-time ball game. But at the end of the day, this is what you love about college football. This is what you love about playing in the SEC. If you're in one of these schools, that every single week it matters. Every single week it means something to you, that you're playing a quality opponent, and it's going to be a primetime game that everybody wants to see. And that's what it's about. So I love the fact that you get these games week in and week out. I think last year we were all excited because we had an all SEC schedule, because we knew every single week we was going to have to bring it, whoever it was. So I love the fact that you have these games back to back like this, and you see where your team is at, and ultimately you see if you can run this gauntlet, you're deserving of playing in January.
I mean, DJ, man, what is it like, though, man, for you? I mean, you had the premier spot. I mean, the quarterback gonna always be the premier spot, no matter what team it is, no matter what school it is, no matter what game it is. I mean, in between the hedges, you come out the huddle, you looking at the defense, they just rolling down, they going. Them safeties, they going up there at one high. You look out there, you see that one-on-one matchup, and you saying to yourself, man, I'm finna launch this thing, man. They giving me the what is that like, man? Getting that 5-step drop. Giving your guy something to catch, man, and knowing, man, listen, man, either he gonna drop this thing or he gonna be going for 6.
So I can't lie. If I walk up there and I see man-to-man coverage, I see single high, I'm drooling. I can't wait to snap the football, because I'm ready to let it go, because I know my guy knows, like me, he sees single high. He knows he got man coverage, and he knows it goes opportunity for me to win. I remember we were playing LSU and NC championship game, and we had the perfect play call on. We knew exactly what they were going to be in. And I walked to the line of scrimmage, and I could not say set HUD fast enough, because I knew it was going to be touchdown. And as a quarterback, that is one of the most fulfilling feelings you can have into the line of scrimmage, knowing exactly what the defense is and knowing that your guy wants to win and he knows exactly what you're looking at to go win. There are a lot of quarterbacks around the country that can understand that feeling. And when you get that opportunity, you got to hit them. And that's why it's so fun when you see these guys do it, because they work so hard on it during the week. And then when it comes to fruition on Saturdays or Saturday nights, it's fun to watch. And the fans love it. I know the teams love it. And you put a lot of work in for it. So whenever you get that one high or whenever, you get that safety roll down on that tight end on two, you got to go win on that corner route. You say, go get it, baby.
DJ Shockley joining us here on 3 and Out, former Georgia quarterback. I know coaches like to say it's all about us and we're not worried about everybody else, but how much do you think Kirby Smart and others point around the country and say, look, people have been anointing us going to the college football playoff, trying to contend for a national championship. Ohio State's been beaten. Clemson has lost twice. Texas A&M was going to be a contender. They've already been beaten. How much do you say, look, don't think it can't happen to you. It's every single week you got to go prove.
It's so funny you bring that up because I get the unique opportunity of being on the Georgia sideline every week. I get to go in the locker room at halftime and after the game. And the number one thing that Kirby Smart tells his team is exactly what you just said. He said, don't worry about what people are saying about you. Don't read the press clippings. Everybody's going to tell you how good you are. But if we focus on us, and these are his words, we focus on us and we don't have any egos on this team, we will get to the place we need to be, which is, playing for a national championship, playing in the college football playoff. So he emphasizes it every single week because he knows that, hey, as soon as you leave this locker room and you go start talking to the media, they're going to be saying how good you are. They're going to be talking about how great you are. They're going to talk about all these other teams that are not looking the part, and you guys look the part. But each and every time he emphasizes it to his players, let's go make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do, and we leave the ego out of it. We leave the ego out of it, we're great. So I know a lot of coaches around the country are saying the exact same thing, and I've heard it personally from Kirby Smart tell his guys that. So one thing I do know is these guys understand the importance of staying within the moment and not worrying about any outside forces.
Now, DJ, man, I'm not gonna. You was born a year after me, so we ain't old. We just seasoned. Now we ain't old, man. We just. But how seasoned do you feel when you walk in that locker room and them boys saying, "Yeah, how you doing, Mr. Shockley? Yes, sir. No, so when you was born, 2000, 2001. It's got to make you be like, dude, y'all boys was coming out the womb. We was out there trying to make it happen on Saturdays in the SEC.
Well, that's so crazy you bring that up. I was just talking about that like 2 weeks ago. I was asking some of the guys, like when they were born, and dude said 2000, 2001, and I just walked away from it. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I was like, I remember those days being a little young whippersnapper walking around now. Like you mentioned, we the more seasoned guys now. And it's cool, though, because they still got the respect. They still know who you are and what you've done. So it's pretty cool to have that kind of recognition from them. But then you look up and you're like, man, this dude here was born when I first was walking into college. And I was like, this is unbelievable. So I'm blessed to be able to, that these guys still have a inkling of who I was and what I did. So it's actually pretty cool. But it definitely is something you say, golly, damn, we are seasoned, but these kids continue to get younger and younger.
I'm not even going to tell you how old I am, DJ. That's all I'll say there. But DJ Shockley joining us here on 3 and Out. DJ, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
All right, folks. Appreciate y'all. Y'all be good.
Appreciate it. In Georgia and Arkansas coming up this weekend. College game day, focus of the college world right there in Athens, as it's a top 10 matchup, and how things can change relatively quick. That's why we talk all the time about don't do those preseason rankings. Look at where Arkansas came from. Nobody thought they were going to be here. Here they are in the top 10 heading into to Athens to play Georgia this weekend. We got so much more to get to here on the show. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio.